Casey, my advisor, likes to use what did you know, what did you learn, and how are you going to implement what you learned in your future lesson. I think the assignment here is to explain what we actually learned that were the highlights of Term 1. And for me it's like Term 1A and Term 1B. As far as the topics that stand out in my mind, they might include know your class. What are the academics? Did the students bring with them, if they came in from a different school, their records, their academic records, testing scores, things like that, standardized scores, so you know where they actually stand in their grade level. Are they above grade level, below grade level, or hopefully at grade level? Interests. Do they enjoy coming to school? Do they have fun with their counterparts there and their classmates? Do they like the academics? Do they like recess, athletics, soccer? What do they do outside of school? Do they like the arts? A lot of different things. Do they like computers? Do they like the AR reading tests where they're actually on computers, or the GG lab? So there's a whole bunch of different things that you can find that potentially you could use as carrots, and those will be valuable when you are finding challenges and trying to develop lesson plans. If you know what they like, those can be used as carrots. What is their family heritage? Are they college grads? Are they doctors and lawyers? Are they mechanics? Again, nothing wrong with mechanics, but the different levels of education will show with what they're probably doing for a living. And that can tend to play a part in, are the parents motivated to get them to college? Can they follow me in my trade instead of going to college and getting an education and a degree? Okay, so after one gets to know their class of new students, what will we find with this data? Do any of them have older siblings that you've already seen? Students that you've had in other previous classes? And do they have reputations? Are there kids who are like the model students and they come through your class, they never pose you any problems, and now you're going to get their sibling, the younger sibling? Are there, flip side of the coin, other kids that would be the opposite of that, the brainiacs? The ones whose reputation precedes them, the ones who every teacher and administrator knows who they are and what they've done. Those are the challenges. If you are getting a younger sibling of a student that you've previously had, it might give you some indication. You're going to get both good and bad. Will we find ELLs? Are there kids who are going to be coming into your class who you will need to take extra time with? You're going to be speaking to them in English. Their primary language might be Spanish. And so it may take them time to hear you in English, process, learn in their native language, process back to English to give you an answer and or to just communicate with you on a regular basis. That can be a huge challenge. How many of those kids will we find that'll be at grade level? You're a 5th grade teacher, they're coming in to you, they have 5th grade scores, standardized scores, they're lower maintenance. Your lesson plans, based on what the district mandates are already geared to that, so it's a little bit easier. And then, other end of the spectrum, how many gate kids will you have? We have a special case in the class that I'm working in where about half of them are tested as gate. And so we have special needs. Special needs, generally people think of lower levels. These are higher levels special needs. They need to be constantly motivated or engaged. As a teacher, you need to engage those students and make sure that they're on task and your lesson plans are challenging enough to keep them interested so they don't get off of task because they're bored. So you're going to have ELL kids, you're going to have just lower level kids, you're going to have grade level kids, and you're going to have your gifted students, which can be the fun stuff. So because of all those different levels, here's where universal access comes into play. I'm going to need to plan my lessons so that the ELLs get it and that the gates don't get bored. Has to be basic enough to where the kids who have to process and go into a different language, a native language, and then come back and process again to communicate with you, whatever the answer is or whatever their next question. It's got to be broad enough and simple enough for them to be able to stay on task, get it, comprehend what we're doing, and then continue to move on. But it's also got to be challenging enough to where he's going to not be bored and want to go off task and do other stuff. So it's a pretty broad spectrum that we're faced with as teachers that create problems in building lesson plans that are broad enough to, again, engage both the lower end of the spectrum, the mid-range, and then the high end of the spectrum. Sequencing. Not only will they be broad enough for universal access so all kids can deal with it, they need to build off one another in a logical progression. Okay, so I have to sequence my lesson plans. What did we do yesterday? What are we doing today? What is that going to lead into for tomorrow? They need to flow so that the kids, the students, are constantly engaged. They're not thinking, shoot, we were doing this one day and now we're doing something totally different. They need to mesh. Objectives. What about objectives? I need to remember that I need to clearly state what the objectives are for any given lesson plan. They will need to include the general class background knowledge. I'm going to need to know for this class, what are they used to? What were they doing last week? What did they do last year? What did the substitute do for the last week while I was gone? There's a whole bunch of different variables that can come into play here. So you need to know what the background knowledge is of the class. Where are they? Or how does my lesson plan for today fit into where they are? I need to know their background knowledge. I need to state the behavior that I expect to see. Are they going to be able to accomplish what I want them to accomplish in this particular lesson? How am I going to know if they've done what they need to do, what the goal is? I also need to include what those goals need to be for assessment. So stating the objective is not that easy. You need to have 3 different components to that, and that would be the conditions, what their background is, their behavior, what do we expect them to achieve, and then the criteria, how are we going to assess? That's really important because if they don't get to a certain level, like for instance our class 80%, if 80% of the questions tend to be accurate, 80% or better, we move forward. If it's not up there, say it's only 60%, what do? Do you just move forward? No, you have to review. So you need to have that assessment built into the lesson plan so that you can determine, will I need more time on this, or can I go ahead and proceed to the next lesson? Styles and methods of teaching. My host teacher was out for 2 days. The first substitute tended to be more of a drill sergeant. The second substitute teacher was very much more relaxed, allowed the students to be a lot more chatty and noisy. But the interesting thing was they both were able to accomplish what was on the lesson plan that my host teacher left. Different styles of teaching, they both ended up with the same result or similar result. So it's kind of cool to see they can do their teaching in their way and still get to what the goal is. Different methods. There's a couple of different things that I saw with my host teachers in their lessons that I thought were really cool. And one of the favorite things that I saw was focused reading. I've also heard it referred to as close reading, which is how they termed it in the class that I'm in. And then they also had thinking notes. What these mean are, okay, we've got a reading assignment for the students that's coming up. How are we going to prepare them or preload them so that when they're reading it, they're just not reading it and going through it mindlessly? We've developed the strategy for them to look at specific things and look for specific ideas that we think are the important ideas in the reading assignment. How do we do that? We can have the kids, the students, talk. What are we going to be reading about? What questions are the students going to be able to come up with that are pertinent to the reading assignment? And these, of course, will be guided by the teacher them to the appropriate ideas. Students will come up with ideas, maybe write those ideas down. As they're reading, they'll be looking for those ideas. When they're answering their own questions, they comprehend the important topics of that reading assignment. It's focused reading because they're focused on finding certain things. Let's say you're in a textbook. They're already partnered, they're already paired, and they have to read through a couple of different segments in the text. Well, one of my guys says, well, let's read the questions first, then we'll know what to look for. Hey Omar, great idea. It's called focused reading. You look at the questions. The questions, according to the text, are the important topics. You kind of figure out what the important topics are because you've looked at the questions already, and now when you're doing your reading, you're going through and you're finding what are the important points, and you're focused on those. So you've built yourself a strategy. Omar was way ahead of the game. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can do these things. I thought that was a really great way that he did on his own. Let's see, another project that I really liked. The reason why I liked this project was it seemed to be fun for the students, so they were engaged. It incorporated technology. They were using the Chromebooks, the internet. They had to look up stuff. They had to research certain things. It was a science project, and they were doing body systems. So they had 6 different body systems to look up. So they're researching on the Chromebook, looking them up, reading. So reading's a huge thing. So now we've got technology, research, that's part of reading, I guess, reading. Then the next part of the assignment was they needed to draw that body system and then label the different parts of that system. Now we're talking a bit of art, because they have to draw and trace and color in. So they have to be a little bit more aware of the art part of it. And then the last component of it, they needed to write a paragraph based on what is the system, what does it do, and how does it interact with the other systems that they were studying. Critical thinking. They had to deal with how is this all going to tie together. So they had to think about what does this system do, how does this system interact with this other system, and again, Common Core, critical thinking, great assignment. And then when their parents came in for open house, they had this really cool project that they could display and show to the parents and show off to the parents. I did learn quite a bit in this term. Very little of it I already knew. So much of what we went through here was brand new to me and very interesting. So a lot of it common sense, some of it applies, some of it, in my opinion, maybe doesn't apply, but it's great to know the basics. How much of this am I going to use? Who knows? Each class is going to be different. But at the end of the day, as I progress through the rest of the course, I know I'm going to learn a lot more. I'll be able to use it for the next 15, if I'm lucky, 20 years, and hopefully make a difference with a lot of young kids getting through the system and getting an education and bettering their life.